Hi, and welcome to the Creative Influencer Show. My name is Melvyn, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about secrets. Hi, and thank you for your downloads. And this is the Creative Influencers Show, episode 005. And in today's episode, we're looking for the link between looking for secrets and design thinking. So how do these two concepts kind of, what do they have in common and how do they overlap one another, for example? So to begin with, let's look at a spectrum in life. And we like to think of life. There are two ends of the spectrum. On one end of the spectrum is what we call conventions. These are basically the truth that everybody knows or everybody should know. All right, and for an example of this would be that the Earth revolves around the sun. Now, this is a truth, and that's something that everybody knows or everybody should know. So that's a convention. Now, on the other end of the spectrum is what we call mysteries. Those are the unsolvable, and they are the one that leaves us guessing. For example, are there really aliens out there in the universe? Well, that is something that we do not know now, and we probably may not ever know about it. So, at two ends of the spectrum, one end the conventions, the truth, and on the other end the mysteries, the unsolvable. Then what does it have? What is in between these two ends of the spectrum? Now, according to Peter Thiel, the founder of PayPal and the author of 0 to 1, what's in between is something that he calls secrets. Now, what are secrets really? So Peter Thiel has his definition, and according to him, a secret is something that is important and unknown. It's something hard to do but doable. So how can we give an example of that? So for example, when you think about a secret, something that is important and is unknowable, something that is hard to do but doable, what does that sound like? It sounds like a challenge. It sounds like a problem. Something that is hard to do. It is a problem. But is it doable? Yes, it is doable. Now, so an example, if you look at it in the context itself, that really looks like a challenge. And so if I were to give you an example of a challenge in the real world, in the business world, you could think of a company like Airbnb, for instance, because for the longest time, people in the hospitality industry have looked at the entire industry as, ruled by the big guys. So it became a convention, it became a way of thinking, it became something that people come to accept, that in order to go into the hospitality industry, you have to take on the big guys, and unless you are you have deep pockets or you have as wide a network as the big guys, you are not going to be able to effectively compete, let alone disrupt that industry itself. Now, all that was true until Airbnb came along. And when the three guys decided to not quite take on the industry, but what they did was that they started the company to meet a particular need, to meet a particular problem, a problem that was hard to solve, but it was doable. Yeah, of course, with technology and with a computer in everybody's pocket, i.e. your phone, now this whole concept of renting unused space from their owners has become a reality, and as a result of that, the entire hospitality has been disrupted by Airbnb. Likewise, in the past, when you think about the transportation industry, it is known that in the taxis industry, for example, it is ruled by a few big companies that run a fleet of taxis that go out there to pick up passengers. Now, that was not true. That was true until Uber came along. And so what we're saying here is that in many industries or in business as well as in life, there are certain aspect of which is a convention or something that we have come to accept it as a convention. We have come to look at it and assume that this is the way things are. And because we see that this is the way things are, we stop questioning it and we see it as a convention. And when we see that as a convention, we no longer look for a way to kind of tackle that particular problem. So in design thinking, when we look at a challenge, when we look at the problem in the project, we call it a challenge. So what is a challenge? A challenge basically is an ill-defined problem that encourages you to ask questions, think creatively, and test prototypes. So that's a challenge, or that's a design challenge in the context or in the in how design thinking look at it. Now, then the question is, why aren't people looking for secrets? Well, there are three ways to look at it. One is that people think that there are no secrets left to be found. Of course, that may sound absurd, but if you think about it, what we're really saying here is that we're accepting the current situation as a convention. Yeah, we're accepting the current status quo as this is the way it should be. This is the way things has always been done here. This is the way that you should do this. So in the past, when I was growing up, I've been brought up to think that if you want a good life, what you need to do is you need to study hard and you need to get a good job. And with that, you will have a good life. Now, is that true? Obviously, that's not true, but that was a way of thinking, that was an assumption that I kind of grew up with. And I could, of course, accept that as a convention and stop questioning it, and just go according to that path. And because if I were to do that, then it means that, I'm no longer saying that, well, there is a better way. Now, and so that is something that it's critical, because without speaking about it in mythical terms, we need to believe that there is a better way. Now, when we know that there is a better way, that is when we start questioning and we start asking ourselves questions about, is there a way out of this particular situation? How can I look for an alternative way, a better way, a different way to kind of resolve my problem? So in order for us to, when I look at it in life, for example, in order to have a good life, or in order to have a life that is purposeful, a life whereby I'm able to use my proficiency, not just for my own gains, but to be able to contribute to the people around me, to my community, and to a certain extent to mankind at large. What is it that I can do? Well, definitely getting, studying hard, getting a good job may not be the only way. It can be the way, but it may not be the only way. And once I've accepted that, hey, that's not a convention, because there could be a better way, there could be other ways, that's when I start looking. But the question is, how do we look for secrets? And that's where we turn to the book by Tim Brown called Change by Design. And he offered three aspects into how we can look for secrets. And what you have here is basically the three things. First, it's insight, and insight means that we look at things that we already have, we look at data that we already have, we look at information that we already have. So for example, in the context of design thinking, when we talk about insight, essentially what we're saying is that let's look at the way people live their lives and see what we can learn from them. What kind of insights can we mine from watching how people live their lives? Yeah, so that's insight. That's number one. Number two, it's about observation. Now, what is the difference between insight and observation? Well, insight means that we go in and we look at the people who are using our products, and we look at what kind of insights we can gain from looking at how they use our products. So that's insight. Now, observation, what is the difference? Observation, it's not looking at people who are using our product, but instead looking at people who do not use our product. So here what we're saying is watching what people don't do and listening to what they don't say. Now, this may seem kind of odd, but later on when I give you a concrete example, you would see it very clearly for yourself. And the third way, it's basically empathy. Now, empathy means to put yourself in the shoes of the end user or the person that you are working with. All right. So the three ways to kind of look for secrets, in other words, to be able to look at what is the problem and how can we possibly solve that problem. So before we even jump into solving that problem, we want to look at what is the problem. So the three ways, once again, are insight, observation, and empathy. Now let's take a look at some examples of each of this so that you have a clearer idea of what we're talking about here. Now, first one, it's insight. Now, insight means learning from the life of others. And in this example here, we are talking about the project called Embrace. Now, just to give you an idea, what is Embrace? Embrace is actually the part of a Stanford program called Extreme Design for Extreme Affordability. Now, Embrace is a social enterprise that aims to help millions of vulnerable babies through a low-cost infant warmer designed for a resource-constrained area with limited or no electricity. So the background to this particular project here is that in developing countries, the infant mortality rate is particularly high. Now, in the developed world, how do we deal with premature babies or babies that are born prematurely? What we do is that we put them in this thing called an incubator. Now, the cost of an incubator used in the developed countries are pretty high. Not only that, not only are they difficult, not only are they expensive, but they are also difficult to maintain and repair. So even if you get the incubators to the developing countries, two things might happen. One is that you may not have electricity. You may not have a stable electricity all the time, and so the incubator wouldn't work as well. Secondly, incubators, just like any machines, will break down. And when they break down, there may not be parts, or there may not be expertise or people who are experienced enough to kind of repair that. So you may be thinking, well, what's the problem here? You could train a bunch of people and kind of get them to repair the incubators, and also you look at the generators and look at how we can provide, a constant level of electricity that's going to be supplied to the hospitals. Now, that is what we may think now, but until the group went to Nepal, and what they learned was something that was that kind of shaped the way that they think about how they should resolve this problem. So what happened was that the team arrived at Kathmandu, Nepal, and after looking at the neonatal unit in one of the hospitals there, the team decided that perhaps they want to see where or how these premature infants were cared for in the rural areas. So the thing is that besides just looking at what's happening at the hospital, they decided to take a look at at the rural areas, because there will be families living in those areas. So they want to look at in the rural areas how this premature infants being cared for. And when they did that, when they went there, they learned two things. One is that a majority of premature Nepalese infants were actually born in those rural areas. So that's number one. And number two, most of these infants would never make it to the hospital. Well, because in places in the developing world, it's not as convenient as what we know of in our developed countries, whereby transportation it's so well established, and you could just grab a taxi, or you could just take a bus and you could get to the hospital. But in the developing countries, that's not to be the case. So the problem is that many of these babies would have never made it to the hospital in the first place. So even if you have good working conditioned incubators, that kind of defeats the purpose, because the point is that the babies never made it to the hospital in the first place. So when the team looked at that situation, instead of coming out with a better incubator, they decided that the problem is not with the incubator. The problem is that the babies are not making it to the hospital. So in order to save the baby, how can they make something that is functional? Something that's functional and without electricity that will work. And so what it came up with was basically it's something like a sleeping bag. So the design looked something like a sleeping bag. And so what you can do is you can wrap the premature infant you can wrap it around the premature infant, and there is a pouch, what they call a phase change material, and that is something that keeps the baby warm, exactly the right temperature. And this thing can be kept warm at that temperature for up to 4 hours. So if it's 4 hours, there is sufficient time for the parents to get the baby to the hospital if there is a need be, right? And after 4 hours, what happens, you may ask? Well, in order to recharge it, in order to get it to the right temperature again, all you need to do is to submerge it in boiling water for a few minutes. So as you can see here, with the insight that the team gained from looking into how people live their lives in rural area and how they've been dealing with premature infants, they then came up with a better solution. Not about how you make a better incubator, but how you can improvise, make a product that is able to be used without electricity, and to be able to last a certain number of hours before the parents can bring the infant to the hospital. So that's the first one, insight. Now the second one is what we call observation. And observation, this is a case that is taken from Tim Brown's book again. Change by Design. And so what in the book, what they say is that it's as follows. He gave the example of Shimano. As you know, Shimano is a maker of very well built bicycles. Now what Shimano did was that they approached IDEO, and they wanted IDEO to design a better bicycle for them. Now, in traditional way, the designers would come up with mock-ups and futuristic design bicycles and kind of give it to the client. But because them being IDEO, they work kind of differently. They use design thinking. So instead of doing that, they actually went out to look at why people ride bikes. And one of the interesting things that they found out was that 90% of adults who rode a bike when they were kids stopped doing so when they became adults. Now, that kind of led to a head-scratching situation. And so what IDEO did was, instead of going around and asking people, why would you buy a bike? They actually went out to ask people, why did you stop riding bikes? And some of the things that they found was pretty interesting. For example, they say that, well, for people who stopped riding a bike when they became adults, one of the reasons was, when they walk into a store, into a bicycle store, they feel that they felt intimidated because of the amount of equipment and the athletic looking salespeople and asking them all these complex questions about a bicycle, which many of them, if they stop riding bicycles when they're adult, wouldn't know. And so people kind of felt intimidated, and they felt like, well, maybe maybe that's not for me. So that's one. Another aspect of it was when they spoke to the people who stopped riding a bike or who don't ride a bike. Why is it that you're not riding bicycles? And one of the things was that they said that, well, it's in a city or in where they live, it is not safe because to ride a bike on the road, there is a certain amount of risk. In addition to that, the motor vehicles may not, bicycles and motor vehicles may not go very well, and so there's there is a certain amount of danger there as well. And so when they kind of gather all these insights together, they decided that the issue is not about why is it that people are not buying more bikes, but the question is why are people not buying bikes? And so that's how it kind of led them to come up with a concept called coasting bikes. And if you look at if you Google Shimano coasting bike, you will be able to see what it looks like. It looks like a very simple bike without all the gears and the functions, but it works just as well. Okay, so that is observation. Essentially, it's not asking people why is it that you buy my products, but you're essentially asking people what makes you not buy my products. Okay, so that's the second way to look for secrets. And the third way that we talked about, it's something that we say it's called empathy. Now, empathy, essentially, it's about putting yourself in the shoes of others. And so in this example here, you have Stan Noack. What he is actually a physicist, and physicist at SLAC National Accelerator Laboratory. So what he does is that he spend his working day looking at X-ray spectroscopy to understand the chemical and electronic properties of metal. So basically, he's a physician and a physicist, and he works in the hospital. Now, what this example that we're sharing with you here is that Stanford Hospital actually went through a design thinking program to find out how they could better enhance the experience of a patient in the emergency department. So instead of getting the doctors and say, well, how you can do it better, how fast you can do it, they kind of created a simulated situation whereby a fictional young woman is being brought into the emergency department after an automobile accident. And by doing by having Stan Noack playing the role of a father and going through the entire process itself, the kind of understanding from the perspective of the patient rather than from the perspective of the physician or the doctors and the nurses can give you some very interesting insights. Now, and as a result of that, the entire department was able to look at how they could enhance the entire experience of patients being brought to the emergency department. All right, so there you have it. The three ways of looking for secrets, what we call insights, observation, and empathy. And so that leaves me to the question for you. And my question for you basically is this: are you looking at your life as conventions or mysteries? Is it one end of the spectrum and the other end of the spectrum? It's everything to you binary. It's everything, a truth or a mystery. Are there certain secrets? Yeah. And what are some of these secrets? What are some of these, difficult to do, hard to do, but definitely doable situations? In other words, what are some challenges or problems that may seem difficult to solve, but it is actually solvable? What are some of these challenges in your life? What are some challenges in your business? What are some of these challenges in your personal relationship with people? Yeah. What are some of these challenges that seem difficult to solve, but they are truly solvable? And the most important question is, are you looking for ways to resolve them? Now, what we have here is this diagram that's taken from IDEO's website, and basically this diagram talks about design thinking. And very quickly, what it's saying is that instead of approaching a problem from either a feasibility or viability standpoint, that means you're saying that whether is this problem technically feasible to be solved, using existing technology and resources, or is this problem viable to be solved? Is there viability in solving this problem? Instead of asking these two questions first, let's ask the most important and often overlooked question. And the question is this, from a human standpoint, are we able to look at a desirable solution to this problem? So back to my question, what are some secrets in your life, something that it's hard to do but it's absolutely doable? What are some challenges? And are you looking for ways to resolve them? All right. And with that, I would like to invite you to join the Creative Influencers community. And if you haven't, please do so by going to melvyn.me/newsletter, and this is where you could join the Creative Influencers community. And on top of that, you will receive a copy of Design and Live the Life You Want, a book for free when you join. All right, and my name is Melvyn, and thank you for joining me, and I will see you again soon. And this is Melvyn Tan checking out for now. Bye bye.